Hey everyone, welcome back to Cracking the GRE Math Subject Test. We're on the Precalculus chapter. This is the second question. This question gives us an inequality, and we're asked to find the set of positive values that satisfy the inequality. Now, the trick to solving this type of question is to rewrite the inequality in the form P of x over Q of x is greater than 0 or less than 0, either way, where P and Q are polynomials, and then to partition the number line where the roots of P and Q are, and to check each of those partitions to see if the expression is positive in that partition. And that way we can figure out where on the number line for which values of x the inequality is satisfied. I'll show you what I mean. In our case, if we rewrite the inequality with all the terms on the left side, we get 1 over x minus 1 over x minus 1 is minus 1 over x minus 2 is greater than 0. Okay. Well, if we get a common denominator, we'll have x times x minus 1 times x minus 2. That's going to be our common denominator. It's also going to be our q. Okay. And our numerator, well, that's going to be, from here, we're going to have x minus 1 times x minus 2. Okay, that's what we have to do we have to multiply 1 by x minus 1 and x minus 2 to get that common denominator, minus x times x minus 2 minus x times x minus 1. Okay, and all of this has to be greater than 0. Well, let's just write what this comes out to be. From this part, we get x squared minus x minus 2x is minus 3x. Minus 1 times minus 2 is plus 2. Okay. And over here, we have a minus x squared and a plus 2x. And over here, we have a minus x squared and a plus x. Well, let's see. X squared, let's go back to our black pen. Our x squared and minus x squared canceled out. A minus 3x and a plus 2x and a plus x, that also cancels out. So what we're left with is 2 minus x squared all over x times x minus 1 times x minus 2. And all of that has to be greater than 0. Well, now we have our P of x, which is 2 minus x squared. This is our P of x. And our Q of x is x times x minus 1 times x minus 2. Well, what are the roots of P of x? Here, let's draw it on the number line. We have a 0, 1, 2, negative 1, negative 2. The roots of P of x are plus and minus root 2, because 2 minus x squared and x equals root 2 and x equals negative root 2 are what satisfy that equation. 2 minus x squared equals 0. So we remember root 2 is about 1.4, so we're going to write it over here. Root 2 and minus root 2. And then in our denominator, so these two are roots, so we're going to put a little circle here and a circle here. And on the bottom we have x equals 0, x equals 1, and x equals 2. Those are the roots. Okay, so we've partitioned our number line. Now, we're only interested in positive values of x. So we're only going to look at the right side of the number line. We don't care about the left side. So now let's take a look at each partition. Well, first let's look at the numbers between 0 and 1. Well, if we take a number between 0 and 1, for example 1/2, and it doesn't matter which number we choose, what do we get? Well, the numerator, now we're going to look at our inequality here. 2 minus x squared is going to be positive because, let's say 1/2 squared, that's about a fourth. That is a fourth, and 2 minus a fourth is a positive number. So we're going to have a positive numerator, and our denominator is going to be, well, x is 1/2, that's positive, but then x minus 1, that's going to be negative, and x minus 2 is going to be negative. So we're going to have a positive times a negative times a negative. So that's going to be positive altogether because we have an even number of negatives. So we have positive over positive. So altogether, this whole area is going to be positive between 0 and 1. Well, positive is greater than 0, so we know that 0, 1 is going to be in our solution. Now let's check what happens between 1 and root 2. Well, if we take a number between 1 and root 2, then 2 minus the square of that number is going to be positive because the number is, let's say x is a little bit less than root 2, so x squared is going to be a little bit less than 2, so 2 minus a number that's a little bit less than 2 is going to be positive. So this whole thing is going to have a positive numerator. But in the denominator, we're going to have x is going to be positive again. X minus 1 is going to be negative again. Or is going to be positive now because we have a number that's bigger than 1. And then x minus 2 is still going to be negative because the number is less than 2. So now we're going to have just one negative in the numerator, in the denominator, so that's going to be negative, and then a positive divided by negative is going to be negative. Now between root 2 and 2, the numerator now is going to be negative because x squared is going to be bigger than 2, so 2 minus a number that's bigger than 2 is going to be negative. Let's put that up here. We're going to use we're using red, and then the denominator is going to be x is going to be positive. X minus 1 is going to be positive or negative because we have a number that's bigger. Sorry, it's going to be positive because we have a number that's bigger than 1. And then x minus 2 is going to be negative because we have a number that's less than 2. So we're going to have one negative, and that's going to give us altogether a negative. And so a negative divided by negative is going to be positive. So we know that this interval root 2 to 2 is also part of the solution. Now we just have to check this last interval between 2 and infinity and see what we get. Well, any number that's bigger than 2, when you square it, that's going to be definitely bigger than 2, and then 2 minus that is going to be negative, so our numerator is going to be negative. Our denominator is going to be a positive number times a positive number times a positive number, so it's going to be positive, so the whole thing is going to be negative. So that's not part of our solution. So our solution is going to be the union of the interval 0, 1 and the interval root 2 to 2, which is answer choice A.